I think we're good to get started now. So thanks again to those of you who heard me say that already. Welcome everyone to Capital RX's Never Move Again webinar. I think you're all really going to love this. This presentation's going to be really dynamic. Maybe some of you will join our mission and end up never having to move your pharmacy benefit program again. For the brokers and consultants out there, your clients will be all set, have a great foundation for their pharmacy benefit plans. I'm Justin Venieri, Director of Communications at Capital RX. And I'm about to turn the mic over to Josh Golden, Senior Vice President of Strategy here. He'll dive right into the materials we've prepared. Of course, AJ Loiacono is with us, our co-founder and CEO as well. One quick housekeeping item. We will be taking questions. You can submit those per usual on a Zoom webinar. Just look across the bottom of your viewer there. And then we'll most likely publish the highlights early next week. And I think that's about it. So Josh, why don't you take it away?
Well, let me go ahead and make sure I'm off mute. Can you all hear me okay? All right, great. We'll go ahead and get started. Well, thanks very much, Justin, and thanks to everyone who's dialed in and is going to be spending the next hour with us as we talk about an exciting new strategy that we're rolling out here at Capital RX. In my role here at Capital RX, I'm responsible for assessing market-wide trends that impact the industry at large and the clients that we serve. So I want to spend the next few minutes explaining some of the market dynamics that led us as a company to introduce the solution that we're going to be talking about today. So to understand where we are and where we're going, we have to really understand where as an industry we came from. It's important to understand that PBMs in their early days used to function as objective administrators. They worked on a fee-for-service basis, negotiating at arm's length with the rest of the supply chain, right? With dispensing pharmacies, with pharmaceutical companies, et cetera, on behalf of the plan sponsor clients that they served. Over time, over the past, say 2 decades or so, the PBM started to realize that there was immense profit to be made in both owning these commodity services and at the same time leveraging the administrative function of the PBM to influence the way that patients use the commodities. This spawned the evolution of things like mandatory mail order dispensing, exclusive specialty dispensing, et cetera. And now, as a result of this, in today's world, only a tiny fraction of PBM enterprise profitability comes from actually being a pharmacy benefit manager. The vast majority of traditional vertically integrated PBM profit right now comes from these various commodity functions that sit around the periphery of the PBM. This is a commingled, we call it a commingled profit model. It makes it really virtually impossible for plan sponsors to assess price against value for each of these different functions. In fact, I would argue that most ERISA plan sponsors can't tell you, they can't even tell you what the administrative cost is for their own benefit, how much it actually costs for the PBM to administer their pharmacy benefit plan. They're charged maybe a low admin fee, or in some cases even no admin fee by the PBM, but everyone knows, right? Everyone knows that that low fee is subsidized by unchecked spread and margin that's kind of spread out across the different commodity functions here. So what's the plan sponsor's administrative cost, right? Are they paying $5 to their PBM, PMPM? Is it $20 PMPM? Is it something in between? The reality is that the client is never going to know the answer to that under a traditional vertically integrated PBM arrangement. But there is one thing that we do know when we zoom out and look at the enterprise as a whole. We do know that the total profit that's retained by the PBM is outsized relative to the value that's provided. And that's because for a typical vertically integrated carrier PBM, the PBM segment generates something on the order of 60% of corporate profits, despite the fact that the pharmacy costs represent only about 25 cents on the healthcare dollar. So it's not just that the PBMs are making too much profit. I would argue that they are under an integrated PBM model, that it's too much and it's unchecked. But it's not just that they're making too much, it's that their sources of profitability cause them to make bad decisions for the ERISA plan sponsors that they serve. And I'm going to give you an example here. This is a PBM that owns a mail order, say a retail pharmacy. They're dispensing 90-day fills of GLP-1s. Right out of the gate, I have an issue with that, right? This is a questionable practice. We're talking about a disease state, a medication class that has a therapy discontinuation rate somewhere in the 50% range, right, for some populations. So it's questionable whether that first 90-day fill should have even gone out the door. But once it does, the PBM allows their own pharmacy to refill that prescription earlier and earlier on each subsequent fill. By the end of the year, as a result of these early refills, the patient is sitting on almost 90 days of excess supply for this GLP-1, all at the expense, dollar for dollar, of the ERISA plan. This is medicine that's either not ending up in the patient's body, it's sitting in the refrigerator, or it's medicine that's potentially, worst case, being diverted, shared with friends, sold on the gray market, et cetera. This is pure waste for an ERISA plan sponsor. And the ERISA plan, unfortunately, in this situation, is both the victim and, to some extent, as we'll learn, the enabler of this type of behavior. Now, the industry is experiencing something of an awakening right now. There's a lot of exciting things happening. I'm sure we're all following all of the different headlines in the news. Probably the most prominent headline: the Federal Trade Commission has called the largest PBMs to the carpet on the conflicts of interest that exist within their vertically integrated business models. It's a Section 6B investigation, which has culminated in the release of an interim staff report that was designed to be for the benefit and the information of the staff, but obviously was released to the public as well. And it's worth taking a moment to dip into some of the details of that staff report, because I think it's very revelatory. The interim report includes a litany of accusations about conflict of interest that exist within the PBM business model. For industry experts, like perhaps many of you that are dialed in today, some of these business practices might seem kind of like, no, of course, yeah, this is totally commonplace, and we knew this was going on for a while. Things like aggressive steerage by the PBM to their own pharmacy assets, rampant spread price profiteering. The report calls out an example of a couple of specific generic specialty drugs where they had found overcharges of $1.6 billion over a 3-year period by the big three PBMs on just 2 drugs that they called out as examples above. This is hyper profiteering above the national average drug acquisition cost, or NADAC. All this, I think, is probably not a huge surprise to most experts in the industry. One finding that was tucked away deeper into the report that jumped out at me that I think is worth mentioning is that PBMs may be expediting PA approvals when the patient fills a drug at the PBM's own pharmacy. So again, another example where the PBM has taken an objective administrator function, right, like prior authorization, and has allowed it to be influenced or overridden by their own financial incentives. The PBM profit model really has kind of poisoned the well for ERISA plan sponsors. Okay, so that's the FTC. Meanwhile, across town, over at the Capitol, members of Congress have put traditional PBMs in the hot seat. I know we're all aware of this, right? A big series of hearings that occurred this year in the Senate Finance Committee. The House Oversight Committee held multiple hearings. And even just last week, we had another hearing from the House Judiciary Antitrust Subcommittee. So these hearings are ongoing. The underlying theme here is, let's dive into the PBM business model and figure out where these conflicts are and how they're potentially contributing to increases in price and increases in cost for patients and plan sponsors. The last of the oversight committee hearings was probably the one that garnered the most attention, right? CEOs from all of the big three PBMs were there. They were called to testify. They endured a barrage of very, very tough questioning, interestingly, from both Democrats and Republicans, right? So demonstrating that this is one of the very few issues in America that both sides of the political aisle are totally unified on, right? That this is a problem that needs to be solved. In one particularly fiery moment, we had Representative Jake Auchincloss, who highlighted examples of hyper-profiteering by one PBM, by CVS Caremark, providing examples that he had found in actual plan sponsor data in his state where the PBM had marked up drugs as much as 38,000% over the NADAC price for those products, the same type of hyper spread that we saw referenced in the FTC report. By the way, I deserve a pat on the back. I practiced pronouncing his name. I promised AJ I would pronounce his name correctly. That, by the way, was the hardest part of my presentation, and I got through it cleanly, so I'm pretty happy now. Okay, so as these findings come to light, right, the FTC investigation, the hearings and the testimony on the Hill, what I think plan sponsors really need to keep in mind is that it is not the PBM that is ultimately held accountable for the behavior here. Due to ERISA law, it is actually the fiduciary plan sponsor that's left holding the bag on all of the mismanagement that's occurring within the PBM space. And that reality is playing out right now in real time in a wave of class action lawsuits against ERISA plan sponsors, alleging that they had failed to exercise prudence as a judiciary in selecting the PBM that they did, in agreeing to contract terms that were detrimental, to the plan or to the members, and allowing the PBMs to get away with rampant, hyper profiteering on specific products. To be clear, I want to take a moment and appreciate this. The lawsuits spend a lot of time outlining the bad behavior of PBMs. But interestingly, PBMs are not named as defendants in these lawsuits. In fact, nowhere in the lawsuit does it even allege that the PBMs violated their contracts with the plan sponsors, right? What the lawsuits really suggest is that it is, in fact, the contract itself that is the problem, right? It's a contract that forces plan sponsors to use the PBM's commodity services exclusively. And then it allows the PBM to operate basically in total financial opacity. And that's really at the heart of the problem that we are looking to solve with the strategy that we're going to be discussing today. At the heart of it is a problem of what we call contractual entanglement, right? The PBM takes these commodity functions that actually, if you know what you're doing, they're actually quite easy to procure and migrate and move to different vendors. Things like mail order and specialty dispensing, right? And they contractually anchor them to a claims processing contract. And claims processing historically has been managed on these archaic 30-year-old claims processing platforms that have been a nightmare to implement, a nightmare to transition from one to the other. So as a result, for a large employer with a highly complex benefit structure, right, the perceived hassle of moving from one claims processing platform to another, doing that implementation, makes switching PBMs a very, very rare occurrence. It's essentially like a Halley's Comet occurrence, right, for a very large plan sponsor. Another way to say that is when you as a large plan sponsor hire a PBM, you are basically stuck with their owned pharmacies and their GPO arrangements for the next decade, reasonably speaking. Now, PBMs know this, right? They know full well that this entanglement allows them to sidestep marketplace competition, allows them to avoid competitive pressure. And so over time, what happens is the market competitiveness of these commodity functions starts to deteriorate, right? The service levels atrophy, the pricing doesn't keep up with market. Now, the plan sponsors will try and claw back some of that value. Year over year, they might do a market check exercise every year. But as they see, when it plays out, those exercises only provide a little bit of incremental relief. Next time they go to do an RFP, lo and behold, there's this massive windfall. The pricing has gotten way better in the market. And that windfall, by the way, that the quote unquote savings that comes from the RFP is not a victory for the plan sponsor. This is not good news. This isn't, in fact, what it is it's proof, right? It's proof positive that the incumbent has been exploiting those commodity services for profit over the past 3, 5, 7 years of the relationship. So, we're ready to rethink this from the ground up. Solving this problem takes a couple of things. It takes financial alignment, right? The willingness to de-link PBM profit from the price and the volume of drugs. And it takes a modern technology platform, right? The technical ability to execute on this vision, to plug and play modular functions easy, to interoperate with different third parties fluidly. There is, candidly, we believe, only one PBM in the industry right now that can offer both of those things. Spoiler alert, it's us, right? And that's why I'm really excited to hand things over to AJ so that he can walk through our strategy for how we intend to support large plan sponsors, large payers, as they attempt to navigate the PBM world. And I'll hand it over to AJ. AJ?
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. I mean, as Josh pointed out, our thought here is to kind of move the industry back to its core. I always say, let's go back to the future. Let's focus on plan administration. And when we started to really think through this, our experience with health plans, these could be regional health plans for commercial care and CAID, these could be Blues plans. Whatever it may be, what we started to realize is what we call them as sophisticated payers. These large payers oftentimes have their own GPO arrangement. They have their own mail specialty fulfillment. They own their own retail contracts. Our job as an independent processor is to deliver the highest level of service and to really help them unleash their creativity. That could be financial creativity through GPO economics, that could be clinical care, patient engagement, whatever it may be, by using our Judi platform. Judi is the brains of our organization. Judi is short for adjudication. People ask me this all the time, like, what's with the name Judi? But Judi is the platform. And what we started to think about was, well, on the commercial side of the business, we have payers that are 50,000, 70,000, 100,000 plus lives. Large payers, they are effectively a health plan. And what we started to understand is if you give someone an independent platform that's future-proof, that has secure interoperability, that has the ability to provide the connectivity and options, you're really suddenly providing this tool set where what if people never had to move again? I mean, really, if you think about it, the question that is posed every 3 years or so for any employer group is, I need to go out to bid to capture value, but people are reticent to change because that would involve mailing new cards, new patient portals, transferring scripts, perceived encumbrance or friction points for the population. But what if you never had to move this again? And so we decided to think about using Judi for the employer population. And really what you're trying to solve for is a combination here of compliance, what we'll talk about in a moment for data storage, modular services. These are clinical services, these are point solutions. You want to do this with an agnostic, independent framework, which is we want people to bring ideas to the table. We want people to forge partnerships throughout the supply chain to continually capture and reevaluate value. Strategies of today are going to completely change in 3 to 5 years, and so on. The same with financial alignment. You want to go back to this core of if there is a mistake or there is an issue with your processor, there was no financial gain by the administrator in any of these processes. And I think this is often overlooked. I often say when you represent the buy and sell side on the transaction, you only represent yourself. And I think we really have to get back to what an administrator is doing is representing the buy side. We're representing the payer, the person who controls flow of funds in the benefit plan they are providing. And the last part is you need to wrap this in extraordinary customer service. And I always try and have people, pause and think about this is if you have the power of the Judi platform, we have this 24/7, 365 domestic multilingual call center that has the highest net promoter scores in our industry. And you put this back to, again, with a benefit program that's secure, compliant, and future-proof, you really have the ability to never move again as a large payer. So if we start to dig into this CAA compliance, as Josh outlined, this is a white-hot topic, and for good reason. I think a lot of administrative functions today by traditional PBMs don't quite pass the sniff test, which is if there is an error, I go back to this point, there was no financial gain. But if there's a mistake or a reclassification issue or an overcharge, whatever, and someone made financial gain, that is an inherent conflict of interest. And this is an extraordinary problem that people have been overlooking for far too long. And I think litigation and regulatory oversight is starting to bring it into focus. So we go with this aligned financial model, no conflicts of interest. All members receive the same pricing. This is another interesting one. When people sit there and they say, oh, we pass 100% through, I mean, if anyone's ever done auditing work or procurement work, you're going to see in 2 seconds there's a very big difference between the rebate schedule between big and large. There's a very big difference between any kind of network pricing between big and large. And that certainly doesn't mean they're getting the fair price. And it's certainly, we go to artificial variability, you're not getting the real price. Full claims data access. And this is not just, hey, the claim file. I'm talking everything. I'm talking 835 remittance, not just for the customer, but everything in the network. Because what people don't know is if someone is obviously being given a lower price to what your reimbursement was on your transaction, that's spread. And all of this information should be accessible to the fiduciary, the payer. Full rebate payment access, full network reimbursement access. I always say an efficient market is where buyers and sellers freely communicate on price, and that is Judi. Next thing we want to look at is data storage. You know, one of the beautiful things about Judi is, yes, she's modern architecture, she's cloud native, open API architecture, but this gives us the ability to give our customers unlimited data storage, both pharmacy and medical data storage. So we do this for some of our customers. It's up to you. But this helps people when you're designing clinical programs or looking at longitudinal care programs for patients, total cost of care, value-based care, and contracting. You know, again, our job is to unleash the creativity of our customers. I often say no one person has the future solution for healthcare. It is thousands of ideas working in harmony, but being unleashed in a platform that allows these thoughts to exist. Full data ownership, including pricing, CAA compliance, which is both the reporting and the filing functionality, and all of this operating in the most secure infrastructure possible. You know, one of the things that we've worked so hard here at Capital Arcs is not just SOC 2, Type 2, SOC 3, high trust compliance. We operate with NIST 853 as a standard. I think it's revision 5. And we're moving to FSMA. We hope to have this completed by the end of the year for government standard. Why is this so important? Well, you just have to go a quarter through any news cycle and look at some of the vulnerabilities with some of our aging infrastructure, which unfortunately is both a vulnerability for the payer, but also it is an issue for the member. Modular services. I think this is another area that is overlooked. We are a culture of yes. Secure data exchange is obviously important, and this includes everything from eligibility to patient records to accumulator information with different payers. I think at this point we push and pull data with over 600 unique entities. The point here is that if a client has a new clinical service, you want to have someone else manage your prior authorization? My answer is yes. How may I help you with that? Someone would like to use a new point solution. Fantastic. How may I help you with that? And what's really interesting is most modern point solutions are also cloud native open API architecture. And this is very easy for us to connect in an SSO integration. So it's a seamless one login experience for members. The other thing that we want to talk to and that Josh has been talking about is agnostic network approach. Use any retail network. Use any mail. provider. Use any specialty, use multiple. Under this framework, we are just the administrative service. And I say just because I want to create a clear line of demarcation here, is that you want to separate GPO economics from administrative economics. If you're using the Judi solution, you're looking for someone to give you a world-class administrative and secure and compliant experience. But for your economics, why are you limited to one thing? Why are things bundled or funneled one way? I think this needs to be changed. I think this has persisted for far too long. No other market truly behaves this way. Buyers and sellers freely communicating on price, that is the definition of market efficiency. And this is what we need to get back to. Financial alignment. This is important. This is part of our charter here at Capital RX. I mean, I know when I started this company with my partners and colleagues, people were like, hey, why don't you keep some of the money? You could probably be making an extra 10%. I go, it was never our money to begin with. It's the payers, it's the fiduciaries. I don't think anyone has a right to it. I should be paid for my services. I often joke, EY is our auditor. EY does not charge us 5% of our gross revenue. That would be a terrible conflict of interest because under that model, I'm sure they would conceive of ways for me to report more gross revenue under GAAP. That makes no sense whatsoever. We are a certified B corporation. We are a socially responsible corporation. We do not make money on drug spend. This is the definition. And I want to be fair. If someone wants to make money on drug spend, be a manufacturer, be a wholesaler, be a pharmacy, be a GPO. You just can't do both at the same time. So if you want to be an administrator, just administrate claims. But you cannot funnel claims and represent the buy and the sell side of the transaction. That is a horrible conflict of interest, and I will debate that to no end, publicly or privately, with anyone. We operate with a single flat administrative fee. Our focus, again, here is the plan and the patient, trend management, and aligned clinical strategy. And I want to be fair. There are no two customers that are same. I have some customers that are very focused on outcome and a little bit less on cost. I have some that are very focused on cost and a little bit less on access. I have some that want to find the perfect balance. The point of it here is we're always aligned with your goals. Last area is customer service. This is an important part because at the core of any administrative platform is the administrative function of engaging with customers. And that is both at the administrator, HR, people level, but also the patient, the membership across the actual plan. And the beautiful part about this is, first of all, under the never move again, you never have to change member cards again. You never have to change call center, never have to change website, applications. You never have to redirect people. And you're using an infrastructure that has 24/7, 365 domestic call center, extraordinarily high net promoter score and client satisfaction, extraordinary speed to answer, pharmacists on every shift. And what is often overlooked by people is back to certifications. On the clinical side, if it's URAC or NCQA, or on the security side to ensure that this is the most compliant and what I would say secure infrastructure. And this is overlooked time and time again. But when you put all of this together, you're finally coming up with a solution where people don't have to keep re-implementing to gain value. And so what we want people to walk away today and to begin to understand is when we talk about this concept of Judi Health, that this is a separate solution designed for America's largest payers. And large payers are our most sophisticated payers. And what we're trying to have people understand is the importance of giving the payer an independent, compliant, ERISA-compliant program. We want to remind people that there will always be mistakes in claim administration. Anyone who says there's no mistakes in claim administration is clearly not administrated a plan, or certainly not at scale. But if there is a mistake, you solve it. You make all parties whole and you move on. But there was no inducement. There was no conflict of interest where the administrator, by moving to a specific pharmacy or making a particular clinical or formulary decision, that they were able to make more money. You don't have this under the Judi Health program. You have limitless scale and interoperability. If we're able to operate with what I would say the scale to handle tens of millions of lives on the health plan side, you could certainly handle a commercial payer of any side. And I always want to make this clear. Anyone who's ever processed government claims knows that it is 10 times harder in the US healthcare system to process a Medicare claim than a commercial claim. In addition, the average health plan must have 600 to 10,000 different plan designs. It's not even close. Also, consultants play a central, critical role in this model because now instead of waiting every 3 years to engage a new strategy or to think about a new clinical possibility for your customer, you can evaluate and deploy value in real time. There's no more waiting. And so we always want people to understand the consultant is already performing these functions. Your advisor is already performing these functions every 3 years, but there's no reason why they can't think about, hey, I want to do a partnership with this new mail facility, or I have this direct partnership I'm very interested in. Let's evaluate it. We like it. Let's get it on the platform. There's no holdup, and the economics don't magically change. Someone says, hey, I want to carve out prior authorization. I say, great. Sounds amazing. Your admin fee will go down. But if someone wants to carve out PA with some other PBMs, they want to talk about recasting rebates or rethink the entire contract guarantees. We don't have that again because there's no money being made on drug spend. And our job is to obviously focus on the right standards to have the right approval rates on prior authorization. We're not worried about throttling up to make sure there's maximum value and volume going through my mail or specialty facility. We don't have that conflict of interest. And so no more changing cards. No more new patient portals, no transferring scripts, and certainly no risk of doing another implementation. Once you're on the Judi platform, you legitimately never move again.